Our guest on this edition of CityWide is Camille Rivera. She's a leader in the Working Families Party in New York and who also serves as executive director of the nonprofit United New York. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So most people have trouble keeping track of the Democratic and Republican parties. They may not even be aware that there is a Working Families Party, although you are recognized by the state of New York. So why don't you tell us what the Working Families Party is?
The Working Families Party is an organization, actual party that people vote to actually, where candidates actually get to acquire that line, sort of like the Democratic and Republican Party. And we run progressive candidates on major issues that are really important to working people. It's a collaboration of labor and community organizations who basically have said that in order to actually highlight issues that are representative to working people, they needed to have a voice in order to do that. And one of the major voices was to actually have a line where people actually can vote on their issues that really matter.
So when I go to vote in November for state assembly or Congress or president of the United States, I'll see Democrat on the machine, I'll see Republican, I guess conservative party, and then I'll see the Working Families Party also?
Yes, you will.
And will I recognize any of the names?
Yeah, you will. For example, or we don't know what's going to happen with this line as well. Obviously, there's a whole process of how you get on all ballots, the Republican, Democratic, and obviously the Working Families Party. But last year, the governor of the state of New York was on the WFP line when he was running for governor, and got a substantial amount of votes. Senator Schumer and Senator Jim are also on the Working Families Party line. So you'll definitely see those names, and you actually have a choice to vote on the WFP line.
Well, all of those people you've mentioned are Democrats, so why do we need another line for people to vote for them on?
I think it's really based on the actual vote of the WFP line is actually a real statement to the fact that, yes, I'm a Democrat. Yes, I might be voting for Governor Cuomo, but I'm actually voting on the WFP line because I'm actually focused on these, number of issues that are important to working people, and that's how I give my power. And the number of votes the WFP has as an organization represents the amount of people that can really have a voice in politics.
So is it symbolic or does it have practical consequences?
I think it has practical consequences, obviously, because there is what's called fusion voting, where those votes actually count towards the votes of the, at the end of the day, if Governor Cuomo, right, was in a really tight race within against Palladino at that point, and it was really a contested race, the WFP has and could have actually been a margin of victory. And you saw that, for example, in the state Senate last year when the Democrats actually lost the Senate, there were particular lines that some, Democrats and Republicans didn't, take.
So it's a place for people to vote for the candidate of their choice, but not necessarily for voting for the party that candidate's associated with.
Right, exactly. But it also adds, right? You could also, the WFP, because it has its own line, because of what's called fusion voting, those votes count towards a victory.
Right, and it's a way of communicating to voters that the candidate that has that line, even if they're on some other line, sort of has embraced your values. So are there things that the WFP believes in that the Democratic Party isn't addressing?
No, I think that the Democratic Party actually has the general representation of working people. They want, Democratic Party was founded on the backs of people who really want to have a voice for working people. I do think that in terms of real issues, there are legislative and political issues that we actually drive and work on, for example, the minimum wage, and then we hold candidates accountable for those issues. And we are focused on those issues rather than the actual kind of idea of what the Democratic Party is or the idea of the Republican Party. So for example, green jobs, for example, minimum wage, campaign finance, all of those are real important issues to the WFP members and the people who vote on the ballot. And when they're voting, they're saying, well, these people are going to support those key issues, and they're also going to strike a chord, right, when they vote for those people to be able to move those types of issues in the state and nationally.
So you've got voters, don't have to be enrolled card-carrying member of the WFP to vote for a WFP candidate, just like you don't have to be a Democrat, you can vote for a Republican or vice versa.
Right.
Then there are people who say that they are enrolled in the party. That's they're card-carrying members of the WFP, or the Democrats, Republicans, or Conservative. Only they can vote in party primaries if there are any. So primaries for mayor in New York, which, you know, even the mayor himself says is going to determine who the next mayor. Only Democrats are going to be able to do that. And then there's also a leadership structure to the WFP that involves a number of unions and other organizations. Tell us who's involved with that.
I mean, there's a collaboration of community organizations and labor organizations. Organizations such as, 1199, 32BJ, community organizations such as Make the Road and New York City Communities for Change, Citizens Action. So it's a statewide organization, UAW, which was one of the major founders of the Working Families Party.
That's a union, right?
That's a union, the United Auto Workers. 32BJ represents service employees, but doormen, janitors, security officers, and 1199 are healthcare workers. There's also the Communication Worker of America. They're labor unions that are participating leaders in the party. But there's WFP members, right? People who have run and petitioned on their ballot lines, right? Who have become leaders within the party and sit on our board.
So you're enrolled in the WFP?
Am I a WFP registrant? Yes, I am.
Okay. And don't you, I mean, while everybody may share a progressive agenda, don't you also run into situations where the specific political interests of some of those unions and other organizations go in a different direction? Situations where a union is endorsing one candidate, but the WFP, the rest of the leadership would like to support somebody else. How do you reconcile that? Does that happen, and how do you reconcile it?
It happens, and then you reconcile it. You've just kind of answered the question. I mean, I think that, there are certain interests that community organizations have and labor unions have and the party kind of has, and sometimes you can't build that consensus, but I think the whole goal of the actual Working Families Party is to be an organization that sometimes has to be to the left of even people that are representative to the board, to the WFP itself.
So let me ask you a specific situation. In the past, there have been a number of labor organizations that have helped keep the Republican Party in control of the state Senate, or get it back from the Democrats. In other words, they either have withheld support from Democrats, or they have, in some cases, supported the Republican candidates, or supported the leadership, Bruno and Skelos, in their efforts. What is the Working Families Party position for the 2012 election as to whether or not the state Senate as a whole should be controlled by the Democrats or the Republicans?
I mean, I think it's too soon to, I don't think the party has made a decision on that yet. I do think that labor, I think if you're asking me whether or not the party is going to endorse Republicans or Democrats, I think that the party is going to endorse candidates that are going to be, they're going to endorse candidates that are going to speak to the issues of working people, and they're going to take a hard stance on those types of issues.
Right, but I want to drill down. I asked that specifically because it seems to me that there are certain pieces of legislation where it doesn't matter if a particular candidate says that they support your position or not, as long as they are part of a House in Albany where the leadership says that they're not going to pass that bill. So minimum wage, which is very much on the agenda now. Sheldon Silver, the Speaker of the Assembly, Democratic leader, says he's all for it. Dean Skelos, Republican leader for the state Senate, says not so fast. So by endorsing any candidate who is a Republican, aren't you empowering Skelos, no matter what that individual Republican member says?
I think we should separate it for two issues. On the minimum wage piece, I think that that's a campaign that I think you're starting to see even Senate Republicans talk a little bit differently about the need to raise wages. And I think that they're actually, for us to say that the Senate Republicans won't pass a piece of legislation that will actually lift people out of poverty, I think in the middle, you know,
too soon.
It's too soon.
Notwithstanding what Skelos is saying.
Notwithstanding what Skelos is saying, I think that there is real movement. If you've seen all across the state, op-eds from Syracuse to Buffalo, you know, people are really saying that $725 is too low. People can't live on $15,000 a year. They couldn't live on $20,000 a year. We need to do something about lifting people out of poverty, and that's the only way to actually stimulate the economy.
But you have to acknowledge, I think, that if it would be an easier lift to get a majority and get a bill to the floor if, say, the Democrats were in control, not the Republicans.
I mean, I think that there are specific issues and key issues that the Republicans are not for. We all know that. And I know that the Democrats have been really supportive on many key issues related to working people. But that, you know, we also got a millionaire's tax and we didn't think we were going to get. And the Senate Republicans passed. So I think that we, you know, because of the changing dynamics of our governor, of our state legislature, it's very, very hard to actually be able to tell where the winds are going to blow. And I do believe that the Working Families Party is going to stick very closely to key issues when they're making their endorsements.
So we're going to talk about that changing dynamic when CityWide continues right after this.
I'm lucky. Let me help you with that. I get to do something I love. It has nothing to do with touchdowns or titles.
Everybody bring it in.
I get to play a part in the life of someone just starting out.
How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork?
I help keep kids in school.
Good.
And that's the name of the game.
My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're speaking with Camille Rivera from the Working Families Party. Given the philosophy of the Working Families Party, I would think that in many ways these are the best of times and the worst of times. On the one hand, you've got the state of Indiana passing a right-to-work law and Wisconsin repealing collective bargaining for public employees, which go straight to the heart of the rights of working people through their unions. On the other hand, the Occupy Wall Street movement galvanized public opinion and brought attention to income inequality and how the system is rigged for people at the very top in a way that, you know, really caught on in short order and was you know, I think we're still feeling some of the consequences from that. So what's your take? Is this a good time for the Working Families Party? Is it mostly about fighting rearguard actions? Where do you think we're going?
You know, I'll be really, I want to talk a little bit about the Occupy movement and the party. I mean, I remember being in my, I have a fellow organizer. Once, when Occupy actually took over the park, I think it was the 17th of September. And I had been feeling, I think everybody had been feeling, right, with Wisconsin, with everything that was happening, just beat up, right? And that we needed to actually re-engage and actually re-energize. And we were making those plans. And my organization had been working with partners. The WFP had been thinking about what they were going to do nationally. The party actually had just organized this really great August recess campaign that focused on Republicans that were really just beating up on, you know, the issue of debt and really just not focusing on the issues that mattered, like jobs. And I remember very quickly saying, you know, when the Occupy Wall Street actually happened, when they actually occupied the park, you know, I don't really know where this is coming from. I don't know how a park is going to really make a difference because I myself was feeling, you know, just disempowered. And I remember 2 weeks later, I think, a friend of mine was supposed to come and meet me for brunch and said, well, I'm going to stop by because it looks like the Occupy protesters are going to walk across Brooklyn Bridge. And I said, okay, well, you know, let me know. Be a little late. I think I was actually going to go to the park, but I didn't have time. So I said, well, I'll prepare for the brunch. And I remember getting a text saying, there's 1,000 people here. And I go, okay, great. I might be late. And I go, okay, no problem. We'll wait for you. And then 20 minutes later said, there's 5,000 people here. And, and I said, okay. He goes, we're taking the bridge. I'll be late for brunch. And you know, it was just like, I couldn't even just fathom what had just happened. Nobody has taken Brooklyn Bridge, I don't think, in my lifetime, right? And I couldn't imagine what was happening.
The last time was the Haitian community in the early 1990s organized over Haitian radio, and nobody knew that they were doing it.
Oh my goodness! Wow, I didn't even know that. So I mean, so like that was a moment, and a lot of the WFP was reignited. I mean, the party was reignited. The partners and the organizations, community organizations, really felt like they had grasped onto something that we have been fighting for a long time, and the movement itself, I would say, re-energized us.
I think the messaging of the Occupy movement, the disparity between the 1% and the 99%, put a vocabulary on the income distribution discussion that was really missing. But I don't know whether it was the structure of the Occupy movement, the lack of sort of empowered leadership or what, but it seemed to me that even the labor leaders and political leaders from the left who went down to show some level of involvement didn't completely embrace what was going on. And in other words, unions would call for their members to show up down there and show support, but they didn't call for their members to start sleeping in the park and to block Wall Street from moving forwards.
I actually disagree. I think, I think different leaders chose different paths. But I think if you look at leaders like George Gresham from 1199, who is very invested in I think there's a difference. I think they're really invested in supporting the Occupy movement and engaging their membership on understanding what it means and what the Occupy movement is actually talking about, right? That what's affecting healthcare is the issues around healthcare connect to what the issues are in the Occupy movement.
So is it class warfare, as the Republicans and some of their allies say?
It's about the math.
Right.
I'm using, I'm going to take Obama's kind of quotes around this. It's about the math. It's about the fact that 1% own, large, massive, large, massive wealth in this country, and that the 99% of this country doesn't.
But again, not necessarily my philosophy, but isn't the 1% the job creators? If you put too much burden on them, isn't that just going to cripple the economy further?
I think if you are a part of the 1%, and you are the masters of your industry, that Elizabeth Warren talks about this, right? Senator who's running for Senate in Connecticut.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. I think that if you create a situation where you are building capital and you are making profit off of an economy that has large purchasing power, and you are creating jobs, and you should be creating good jobs, and you should be responsible about how you're creating those jobs, and that I think that we live in a society where everyone's allowed to have wealth, and everybody should be allowed to have wealth, but you have to be responsible to the economy that to what you're benefiting from, and I think that our country as a whole has not benefited from the large amounts of wealth that people have created over the last number of years, like. If you think of GE, if you think of Verizon, if you think of Wells Fargo and Bank of America, these are captains of industry, like people who have made billions of dollars and have been responsible and have acted irresponsibly with how they've created that wealth, from foreclosure crises to trading, for dealing with gambling on the stock exchange. I mean, I think that all these different things led to an economy that the 99% are suffering from right now. The lack of jobs, the lack of good jobs. People whose houses are still being foreclosed. We just got a call in our organization about an 80-year-old woman who refinanced her home and didn't understand what she was signing or dealing with, and is, underwater. Owes $700,000. Doesn't understand how she owes this money. All she wanted to do was refinance her home. 80 years old, is about to lose her home. So I think that it's not about class warfare. It's about taking responsibility for making the money that you make, making the profits, but also understanding that you're making it on the backs of other people. That the people that you hire in your factory should be paid good jobs. And then when you actually are giving out mortgages, that you should be giving them out responsibly. And I think that's the big issue here. And nobody is taking responsibility. I mean, if you think about the settlement, the national settlement that Obama's trying to organize, I mean, I think that is a perfect example of banks yet again wanting to get over it and not taking responsibility.
Has Mike Bloomberg been a good mayor for working families in New York?
I think that in certain aspects, the mayor has made decisions that I think he feels are good. I think that other organizations and community organizations might not feel that way.
Well, what do you think?
What do I think? I think that in certain aspects, he has done, I think, well on certain issues. I think on other issues, he has a lot to work on. I don't necessarily feel like on the education stuff he's done exactly what we're supposed to be doing. I think, I think that more could be done, and I think he has the ability to do it.
So the clock is ticking on him. He's got less than 2 years left in office. Unclear what kind of major initiatives we'll see. Clearly some projects like the Applied Science Center and other things that he's talked about in the state of the city. We're going to have a new mayor, January 1st, 2014, unless he changes term limits law again. But we're going to have a new mayor. The campaign is going to start in earnest in
it's probably already started already.
a few months. I mean, the candidates are out there, at least some of them, and they're raising money and positioning. But I think most voters aren't really going to focus on this until the presidential election is underway. So, what should New Yorkers be looking for in the next mayor?
I think they should be looking for a mayor that is really focused on working people and about creating a stable economy for the city and for the city of New York. I think they should be thinking about, education reforms that are going to be for every single individual in New York City. I think they should be thinking about how we can actually, raise wages, really raise wages, how we should be doing economic development in a way that's responsible. And I think that you're looking for a mayor that really understands the needs of working people.
So handicap the race for me. Thompson had your support, at least the party support, not necessarily all the unions, in 2009. De Blasio was a candidate. John Liu says he's still in the mayor's race, also had the WFP support. You've got Scott Stringer, Christine Quinn, Tom Allen, maybe others who haven't surfaced yet, but that's the Democratic field at the moment. So you don't have to tell me who you think the party is going to endorse, but tell me how you think this is going to play out.
I have no idea. I honestly don't know. I think it's a very complicated situation. All of them are great. I mean, I don't know about Tom Allen, but I don't know him. But I do know that all of those candidates, all of those elected officials have done really, have voiced their support for working people and the people that represent the party. I mean, I think that all of them have really great qualities to be mayor. And it's going to be a really, really tough race and a tough decision. And I wish I could, answer that question.
So if there was one thing that you very specifically wanted to say to those candidates to mayor, the one thing that they need to be specific about if they come to seek the WFP endorsement, not generally share your values, but if there was one specific thing that you really wanted to hear that would help you decide among those good candidates which one you wanted to support for mayor, what would that be?
I mean, I think, in terms of the party, they really want a mayor that is going to really create good jobs, that's going to have, that's going to pass legislation that will, have more, have mandated sick days for small businesses. I think we want, a raise in wages. I think we want to, have a mayor that's really focused on, education and working people and creating good jobs. And I think that raising people out of poverty, I think, is also something that I think the party is really focused on.
My thanks to Camille Rivera, leader in the Working Families Party in New York. I'm Ken Fisher. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWide.